When an airline goes bankrupt, most people picture something simple. The company runs out of money, the planes stop flying, everyone goes home. That is almost completely wrong. An airline shutting down looks more like a controlled demolition with thousands of moving parts happening simultaneously. Planes the airline never actually owned get seized within hours by companies most passengers have never heard of. Pilots who lost their job on a Tuesday can be flying for a competitor by Friday. And the price of your ticket on an airline you have never flown can jump overnight, even though that airline had nothing to do with the one that just collapsed. We are going to walk through exactly how that disassembly works, where the aircraft actually go, what happens if you are stranded mid-trip, and why a collapse hundreds of miles from your airport can still raise the price of your next flight. The moment an airline ceases operations, the most immediate chaos belongs to passengers mid-journey. This is exactly what happened to Spirit Airlines in May 2026. Every flight canceled, every counter closed. Passengers who had flown out on Spirit now had no flight home. This is where Federal Aviation Consumer Protection Enforcement typically activates, the Department of Transportation coordinating rescue fares across competing carriers. 9 airlines participated, including United, JetBlue, Delta, American, Southwest, Frontier, Allegiant, and Breeze. United capped fares at $199 for most domestic routes. JetBlue offered $99 one-way fares. This protection exists because airline shutdowns historically leave passengers stranded with no contractual path home. But the rescue fare window is short, typically days before pricing reverts to normal. Passengers who paid by credit or debit card are generally protected by chargeback rights and often receive automatic refunds within days. Passengers holding loyalty points or vouchers face a harder road. In Chapter 11 proceedings, loyalty points and vouchers are typically classified as unsecured creditor claims, sitting behind secured creditors like aircraft lessors and lenders in the repayment order, and historically recover only a small fraction of their value, if anything. Here is something most passengers never consider. The airline that just collapsed almost certainly did not own most of its own aircraft. Commercial airlines routinely lease the majority of their fleet through the aircraft leasing and finance industry, firms like AerCap, Avalon, and Aircastle. When Spirit shut down in 2026, the vast majority of its roughly 170 aircraft were under lease rather than owned outright. The moment an airline stops operating, every leasing company wants its property back immediately. Planes sit wherever they happen to be when operations stopped, at gates, on taxiways, scattered across dozens of airports with no clear protocol for who can move them. Specialized firms like Nomadic Aviation Group are hired specifically for this. They dispatch qualified pilots, often former employees of the collapsed airline, to physically locate and fly each aircraft out, frequently having to convince airport security on the spot that they are authorized to board and operate the aircraft. The aircraft typically get flown to long-term desert storage at locations like Phoenix Goodyear Airport in Arizona, where the dry climate reduces corrosion risk. From there, leasing companies decide what happens next. Some aircraft get repainted and leased to another airline within months. Others are parted out with engines, landing gear, and avionics sold separately. On certain aircraft, the engines alone can be worth more than the rest of the airframe. The aircraft do not disappear when the airline does. They get redistributed throughout the industry. Here is the part of this story that affects people who never flew the airline that collapsed. When an ultra-low-cost carrier exits a route, fares on that route do not stay the same. Industry pricing data following the Spirit collapse showed average fares on Spirit's former routes increased by approximately 23%, roughly $60 more on a typical round trip, while passenger volume dropped around 20%. Ultra-low-cost carriers do not just serve their own passengers. Their presence forces every competing airline to keep fares closer to that lower baseline. Remove them, and that pressure disappears. At Spirit's largest hub, Fort Lauderdale Hollywood International, the airline had carried over 28% of all passengers the year before its collapse, more than any competitor. Within days, JetBlue announced 11 new routes out of that same airport. It is not just routes that get redistributed. Airport landing and takeoff. Slot allocation. The limited operating windows airlines are assigned at congested airports, gets reassigned to competitors almost immediately. But on smaller regional routes where the collapsed carrier was the only ultra-low-cost option, larger airlines often have little incentive to step in at the same price point. Those markets can simply lose affordable air travel altogether, sometimes permanently. A major airline collapse displaces an enormous workforce simultaneously. Spirit's 2026 shutdown affected approximately 14,000 direct employees, plus several thousand contractors, pilots, flight attendants, mechanics, gate agents, and corporate staff. Different roles experience dramatically different outcomes. Commercial pilots are typically best positioned. This reflects strong commercial pilot labor market demand across the U.S. Demand for pilots with mainline jet experience remains high, and fleet commonality matters. Spirit's fleet was entirely Airbus A320 family aircraft, one of the most widely operated types in commercial aviation. American, Delta, United, and JetBlue all moved quickly to offer expedited interviews specifically targeting displaced Spirit pilots. Flight attendants generally face a slower, more competitive hiring landscape. Maintenance technicians and ground crew typically fall somewhere in between. Corporate headquarters staff generally face the hardest transition. These specialized roles do not transfer cleanly, and few airlines hire entire corporate departments at once. Spirit was not the first major carrier to disappear this way, and it will not be the last. Pan Am ceased operations in 1991. Eastern Airlines collapsed the same year. TWA was absorbed by American in 2001. Monarch Airlines collapsed in 2017, followed by Thomas Cook's airline in 2019. The pattern across nearly every major airline collapse is consistent. Rising operating costs squeeze margins. The airline takes on debt to survive. Cash reserves run out. The airline gets acquired or proceeds through Chapter 11 restructuring toward liquidation. Spirit's collapse layered several factors on top of this pattern. Pratt & Whitney engine reliability issues had grounded a significant portion of its fleet for extended periods. A proposed merger with JetBlue was blocked on antitrust grounds in early 2024. Spirit had not posted a profitable year since before the pandemic, with losses exceeding $2.7 billion in 2025 alone. The airline filed for Chapter 11 twice, first in late 2024 and again in August 2025. A geopolitical conflict in early 2026 triggered significant jet fuel price volatility, roughly doubling costs and accelerating the cash burn. A proposed $500 million government rescue package fell through, and the airline ceased operations shortly after. The broader issue extends across the entire ultra-low-cost segment. Legacy carriers have launched their own basic economy products to compete for budget travelers, while fuel, labor, and maintenance costs keep climbing. The margin between what these carriers charge and what it costs to fly has narrowed considerably. Frontier and Allegiant remain operational, some expanding to capture Spirit's displaced traffic, but under the same financial pressures that contributed to Spirit's collapse. Here's what this means practically the next time a headline announces an airline shutdown. If you are mid-trip when it happens, the fastest path home is typically a government-coordinated rescue fare program, not the collapsed airline's customer service line, which will likely be overwhelmed or disconnected. Book the discounted fare immediately, because that window closes within days. If you hold loyalty points or vouchers with an airline showing financial distress, understand those holdings carry real risk as unsecured creditor claims. And if you regularly fly a route served primarily by a budget carrier, understand its presence is likely keeping every other airline's prices on that route lower than they would otherwise be. An airline collapse looks sudden from the outside. One day it is flying, the next day it is not. But underneath, it functions more like a structured disassembly than a death. The aircraft get repossessed and redeployed. The routes and slots get redistributed. The pilots get rehired across the industry. Every component gets absorbed elsewhere. Airlines rarely simply disappear. They get taken apart piece by piece, while the employees who lose their seniority, the communities that lose affordable service, and the passengers caught mid-journey absorb most of the actual cost. This is Thrust TV, cleared for the truth.